His hands were up the whole time?
Absolutely. I pray that Lavoie's death will show the American people that these people were inhumane to him. Lavoie opened his door and he got out with his hands up and he started walking toward the back of the vehicle and he said, "If you're gonna shoot, then just shoot me. Just shoot me." And all of a sudden we heard 3 shots, like all together, and he went down. And I was like, oh my God. When he got out of that vehicle, he was not showing any signs of aggression. He had his hands in the air, and he was walking, and he was in snow, and he was very vulnerable, and they shot him dead.
On at least 2 occasions, Finicum reaches his right hand toward a pocket on the left inside portion of his jacket. He did have a loaded 9mm semi-automatic handgun in that pocket.
So a lot of times witnesses don't see things correctly. The FBI released some video. Have you seen this video yet?
I don't think I have.
Can I show you, have you take a look at this
Sure.
video?
So he had his hand up. Look at his hands. His hands are in the air.
Right. And this is, see him right there? That's him. What the FBI is saying is that he specifically reached for something in his left pocket twice.
I can't say if he was reaching for a weapon or not.
I don't know, it looks pretty clear.
Hey, watch.
Watch.
When his arms go down, they're still flailing. They're not reaching. Watch.
So that to you does not look like he's reaching
No.
across his
And then
body
I was
into his
there.
left pocket.
No.
So usually if officers recover a loaded weapon in an area where they see you reach, that's justifiable force. In this case, do you see it as justifiable force?
I don't. I never see him in that video reach for it. I hope that justice is done because he didn't deserve that. His family did not deserve that. He has 13 kids, 22 grandchildren, and they didn't deserve this.
You almost got shot.
Yeah,
And you're still
I did.
willing to be a part of a protest in the future?
It's worth it. If I lose my life for the future of America, it's worth it.
Hi, Steve here. This world is spinning into what seems to be an out-of-control, lawless society, and most people have a very naive view of America. We know that the founders of this country wanted liberty and freedom to live as free men, not dictated to by an authoritarian British government ruling over their every move. Was it wrong to want to be free? No. This is what God intended. He intended us to be free, to do His will, and treat people with justice, fairness, and compassion. This was the reason that men were willing to stand up and fight for their God-given rights. They believed that these rights were given to them by God and not men. As this country continues to move farther and farther away from these freedoms, and the powers of darkness blind and control more people, giving in to Satan's deception, we see good men stand up to the lawlessness and refuse to allow the lawless men to control them. These are not the political social justice warriors that only give lip service to do what's right, but never actually do something to stand up for righteousness. But these are the warriors who stand up to the lawless in our government, those posing as the upright and keepers of the law in America. This was the kind of man Lavoie Finicum was. This was a real man, a man who said that this persecution, prosecution, and lawlessness by our government levied against these ranchers was wrong and not lawful. The way they used governmental power to try and force them to do their will. Back in January of 2016, I published an article on the website detailing this murder by the government, mostly hidden from the American public, just like so many other atrocities our so-called lawful government has committed. Understand, I'm not putting down America. We have more to be grateful for in America than many other countries do. But to say that we're so much more righteous than these other totalitarian countries is a cognitive dissonance that many people in the U.S. still hold on to. I won't go through the case because I've already detailed it in an article on the website, and I recommend you go read it if you haven't already. I'll put a link to the article in the description box below so you can go to it. It'll make you realize how lawless this government has been for decades. I've studied this case and watched the videos by news sources that were closest to it, and it's very clear that Lavoy Finicum was a man that was going to expose the government corruption and the government's attempt to steal the ranchers' land, who refused to sell to them, and they couldn't allow that. He was drawing national attention to this issue. The government under Loretta Lynch and Obama had already been unsuccessful in forcing the ranchers off the land they wanted to steal from them, as the Hammond family ranchers said no to the government offers to buy the land. So the federal government illegally used Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to find any way they could to take their land from them, which they legally owned. Just like the Clinton era of lawlessness under the first woman Attorney General, Janet Reno, the government went into Waco, Texas, where the ATF staged a military-style assault on a small community of some 130 people with the intention of violating their Second Amendment rights. Over the past several years, the U.S. Attorney General and the U.S. Justice Department have established a track record of repeatedly filing civil rights complaints, often in support of known criminals, typically against law enforcement officials and state and local governments. In the case of Arizona rancher Lavoy Finicum, who was shot 3 times in the back by Oregon law enforcement officials and/or FBI agents at the ambush traffic stop in the middle of a desolated area, along with his associates, held and charged with inaccurate and exaggerated charges, the federal government did not demonstrate any interest in protecting the guaranteed constitutional and civil rights of citizens.
Lavoy Finicum, someone who is, to me, a true hero, someone who was murdered in cold blood. We just heard Jeanette Finicum, his wife, his widow, speaking here at the Red Pill Expo in Bozeman, Montana, and it's hard. It's a difficult thing to listen to, but it needs to be listened to. Her story needs to be listened to. And John, can you go into what happened leading up to Lavoy's murder?
We know back in January of 2016, they started with the Hammond family there. It was another ranching family that was being prosecuted by the federal government over a back burn that they burned some grass, about 120 acres all total, on their ranch to protect it from an ongoing forest fire that was coming. Mm-hmm. And it's common here in Montana where I live at, we do the same thing. If there's fires that are coming, we try to do these back burns to protect our homes and our barns and our livestock. Mm-hmm. And they was being sentenced to 5 years in prison. They had already served right at a year and been released by one federal judge. The prosecutor said, well, it wasn't enough time. They wanted them to go back. So people from all over the country, included Lavoy Finicum, the Bundy family, and multiple other people, came to Burns, Oregon to protest this unjust prison sentence. Mm-hmm. Double jeopardy is what most people called it. Mm-hmm. They showed up there and it wasn't seeming to work. They'd been there about a month almost, and off and on, showing up and having different rallies. Mm-hmm. And at the last, they decided to make a hard stand and protest at a federal wildlife refuge. And on January 2nd, a group of about 20 people went out there and decided to protest there and make a stand, and that's what happened. And January 26th is when Lavoy Finicum, on his way to a meeting in another county, was shot down by the Oregon State Police and FBI.
I'm going to meet the sheriff. The sheriff is waiting for us. So you do as you damn well please. But I'm not going anywhere. Here I am, right there. Right there, put a bullet through it. You understand? I'm going to go meet the sheriff. You back down or you kill me now.
Damn it. Are they shooting him? Did I shoot him?
Oh my God! Okay.
And he left his gun, which is unusual for him, but the fact of the matter is he left his gun at the refuge.
He definitely did. And I've investigated this. I've been out to the refuge. I've camped where Lavoy was murdered there along the Highway 395. I stayed there one time for 5 days straight, camping in a tent, going over the videos, going over different things with other people. And Lavoy did not take his gun that day. Lavoy left his gun. He always carried a 6-shooter on his side, an old 44 cowboy gun, which the cops nowadays, they all have semi-automatic stuff or even automatic stuff. And he left it back at the refuge, and he did not take it with him.
And we've all seen the video, the main video from, I believe, the helicopter showing his murder. And of course, their theory, and I call it more of a lie, was that he reached for his gun, which he did not have. But in reality, he reached for the other side after what?
After it happened really quick. It was just a few seconds. His hands were up when he came out of the truck, and then someone came out of the woods behind him, and it's very clear on the video. And a shot was fired. An officer had his arm, actually left arm, extended with a gun or a taser or something that looked like a gun. It went off, and Lavoy's hands came down, and his right hand went to his left side low, not to where a gun would be.
Yeah.
His 6-shooter was always on his right side, but it went low. And seconds later, he dropped to the ground. And as the autopsy shows from the coroner, he was shot 3 times. One was low, and 2 of them are up higher in the back. All of them are from the back. He was shot 3 times in the back, which killed him.
It's absolutely sickening. The fact is, Lavoy was a hero. He was murdered, and there is a massive cover-up, and it goes deep because they continue. The people who murdered him are still walking to this day, and it infuriates me because this all goes back to someone standing as a free human being, a free individual for something that's right. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't use violence or force against anyone. He simply stood for something that he believed in, and he was murdered in cold blood for it.
Lavoy Finicum and his associates were exercising their constitutionally guaranteed First Amendment rights of free speech to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The government is not interested in our rights under the Constitution anymore. When we give more preference to lawlessness than we give to those who exercise their constitutional rights, we've turned away from God's will for our country. When I received an email from Lavoy and Jeanette Finicum's daughter asking me if I would remind people of the murder of her father bleeding out in the snow on January 2016 and the horrible turning point in their family, I said yes immediately. From everything I learned about Lavoy in articles and video I saw, he was a gentle and reasonable man. A man who loved his family and the freedom he believed was our God-given right in America. Lavoy's daughter wrote me and said, "I've written a book. My hope is that the book will spark continued discussion about our tragic story in an effort to get people asking hard questions. This book will also be used to help us fund the financial burden of our wrongful death case. The bottom line is this: we need to keep the unfolding of their story alive as their wrongful death case continues to move forward, along with their efforts for reform. If you do nothing to stand up against unrighteousness in this country, then you'll reap the consequences. But if you'll stand up to the lawless, you may suffer for it, but you'll make a difference for those who love freedom and for your own family, too. I want to ask you to get a copy of Tara's book, Liberty Rising, One Cowboy's Ascent, The Murder of Lavoy Finicum, as told by his daughter. Someone once said that those who won't stand for something will fall for nothing. Think about it. I just want to say a very special thank you to all of you who support Think About It. You are as big a part of what I do as me doing what I'm doing, if that makes sense. You're a partner with me. You help me to continue to do this in spite of all the censorship, in spite of all the demonetization, Google is not my friend, and they're not your friend either. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all of these companies, all of these social media giants, these tech companies, they are bringing in the technology that is just going to be horrifying to us once it's completely unleashed on us. I know a lot of people don't understand what's going on because they started out really great, like Facebook. Connect with your friends and your family. It was great. But it's going to turn into a monster that none of us can even imagine. But I just want to say thank you so much to all of you who support me. I used to put your names at the end and like a scrolling credit thing at the end of videos. I'm not doing that anymore. Not because I don't appreciate you as much as I used to, not at all. The truth is, I think anonymity is probably a way to protect many of you. And a lot of people don't want their name known anyway. But you know who you are, and I know who you are. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you more than words can ever say. I just want you to know that. Thank you so much.